listening to Owning the Buy Box, an IPSecure podcast. This is the podcast for agencies and brands who want to master Amazon, push out unauthorized competition, and take their business to the next level. You're about to hear a conversation that'll help you maximize your growth on Amazon by owning the Buy Box. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to the next part of this podcast with Paolo Ascoli, Director of Ecommerce at Corsearch. I'm your host, Dave Cooper, the CEO and founder of IPSecure. Let's begin. I think the marketplaces, they hear these governments and they hear these entities, regulatory bodies, they make adjustments, but they make adjustments based on the way that, sort of verification was done, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, like very traditional methods, right? And we know you can create a business in 5 minutes with a credit card, right? You can set up drop shipping in a half hour with a partner in another country. Like the ability to circumvent these traditional identity checks, if you will, is just so easy. It's just so easy. It's great. You collect addresses, but what good is that if they're fake? Right?
I was thinking at another case where obviously, the evolution of marketplace systems and structures has obviously, in a way, benefited the seller that obviously tries to, engage in this new activity. And it has been the increase in the complexity of these processes, but not necessarily met by an organized structure of individuals that would, in fact, follow up with those as well. Meaning, I could have a team of, 10 years ago, they would have a team of 10 people dealing with, brand protection, intellectual property right infringements. Today, that team has not necessarily changed, if not for, more manual, let's say, but because the quantity of enforcements may be increased. And so they would try to streamline those tasks in a more, let's say, operational manner. But from a substantial point of view, the attention to the detail and actually responsiveness has in fact declined. With the result of, us taking action on content that, even follows the platform's policy to the dot. But then we just receive pushbacks for really no reason, for generic statements, and then having an internal contact that you can rely upon and, make sure that your enforcement goes in front of human eyes rather than, a tick box exercise. Good luck. That becomes almost paramount. And I'm not even going to start. I mean, we can get onto it later, but in regards to, for example, regulatory or local law violations, where you actually need someone that is appointed individual to actually monitor and maintain, a clean online environment for that platform that obviously knows and is open in reading of local laws and regulation and take action. That's yet another story.
Yeah. Amazon in their 10K says they have 15,000 people and spent $1.2 billion to prevent counterfeits from being sold on their platform last year. And that just sounds like an absolute astronomical amount of money and people. And it is. And if we just accept that at face value, it sounds tremendous. But when taken in the context of, 5,000 new sellers a day being added to Amazon's global ecosystem, trillions of products being shipped every month, it's kind of a drop in the bucket. It's huge in comparison to all other platforms, right? There's no other marketplace spending that kind of money to fight counterfeiting. But nonetheless, we did a study recently with a brand where we purchased a tremendous amount of the same product over an extended period of time. And the level of counterfeit product was astonishing. It was startling. And this is a household name. You have the products in your house right now. I guarantee it. And so it was kind of frightening for that brand and for that customer. And so it just feels like it's not working, quite honestly. I don't know any other way to put it other than it seems like, okay, if you're spending $1 billion, clearly you need to be spending a lot more, because it's just not working.
I have a strong opinion on values and information that is shared by Amazon outside, because it is obviously impossible, or at least you will never know the source of the data. You will never know the methodology of how they count, that $1 billion number that you mentioned before, the 15,000 employees that work, 15,000 employees that do brand protection. That is, I think, more than the combined number of employees of every possible brand protection company that we have today in the world. So 15,000 employees, like that's basically saying every single brand protection company will coming together to enforce an IPM. And we find counterfeits all the time on the platform. So, I'm skeptical of these kinds of figures.
Right.
I see it as a way of obviously, ticking that box. They have boxes to tick, and they have to do it. They do it with in my opinion, the minimum requirement. And where eventually I would, to really see the biggest improvements, in my opinion, would be creating a proper channel of communication between Amazon and the agents, not necessarily only Amazon and the clients, because obviously the clients are well aware of the problems that they have, but they're not aware necessarily of the operations required to solve them. And so you need the agents to actually get into contact with the platform to obviously provide feedback, give examples, express concerns, work collaboratively, which eBay, for example, does. We have, meetings every quarter with the team, with the legal team, with the Vero team in eBay, and we share insights. We draft presentations. They share with us, hey, look, you did this. It was a mistake. Do it like that. There's also like an alignment. They tell us what we can do and what necessarily sometimes is not possible, which is fine. It's fair. It's an open conversation. Amazon, for the purpose of this podcast, owning the buy box, does not do that. Amazon has apparently a very gated, sealed team when it comes down to the brand registry team. If it is even a team, like I start thinking,
Paolo, they don't even have phone numbers. They intentionally don't give their employees phone numbers.
My point being, a good brand protection program is not done by the tool, by the technology. A good brand protection program is created and provided by people. When people start talking and really want to solve the problem, that's when you will see a big difference. That's when ultimately the brands will be the happiest and the consumers would be most protected.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Europe's really been much faster in adopting consumer protections and trying to create transparency on these platforms, and giving brands more avenues for enforcement in a lot of cases. Now, sometimes they put pretty tight guardrails on those various avenues, but nonetheless there are more avenues, more protections in place. And I think the US is still hesitant to really put a lot of pressure. I don't think the protections that exist legally here in the United States for platforms like Amazon and eBay and others are going anywhere anytime soon, because we're so focused on growth and innovation and the ability to allow new products and services to expand, that we're kind of stuck. There was an article yesterday in the Wall Street Journal here in the US, actually about an Australian billionaire. He's he owns a mining company. He's this really wealthy, successful guy in Australia. Well, Facebook is riddled with ads, built and published by these scam artists using his face, using his likeness. And many of them are now using AI to recreate his likeness and his voice in some of these ads. And he's complained over and over again to Facebook, and to no avail. I mean, these things continue to proliferate across the platform. So he's suing them. in U.S. court. And for tons of money. I think $100 million is the first lawsuit that he's filed. And he said he's willing to spend whatever it takes to help change the legal framework in the United States to try to create more accountability. So things like Section 230 and the Digital Millennium Copyright Act and all these things, which were designed really to enable innovation to flourish, and it has. And there's a big debate going on right now, right, between some on one side who think that these types of laws create an environment where kids are going to get hurt on social media. People are going to buy counterfeit products on Amazon. The list goes on. And others who say, no, you can't stifle innovation on the internet. You can't hold it back. You've got to allow us to essentially self-regulate, which is the world we live in today. And I don't see light at the end of that tunnel. There doesn't seem to be a willingness to change the current dynamic. So I think you'll continue to see platforms do, just enough, right? That they think is reasonable. And that's a very subjective thing. Some people's reasonable is another person's, waste of time.
My thought on the topic is a very, I would say, time-based one. Like everything in life, you will always need that one example that pushes the boundary for everyone else to actually take it to the next level. It happens in law, but it happens in sports. You would have never thought that someone could run the 100 meters, in 9.3 20 years ago. But then here you go, you have someone that can do it. You didn't know anyone could be lifting 500 kilos until 3 years ago, and then you had someone do it, and then now there's like 15 people that can do it in the world. So same with in law and evolution of obviously, systems and processes and regulations. That is what we are going to constantly see, and time will show. So ultimately, the balance of interest wants that. In a way, everyone wins. So there's always going to be a situation where you have, clashing opinions and clashing approaches that will find a balance. We'll find a balance between the two. What really should not stop happening is that it should really not stop happening. And in my opinion, you talked about legislation. I'm thinking about the DSA. That was the next attempt since the European trademark, e-commerce directive, applied to the trademark regulation, that tried to regulate the online, the online liability of intermediaries, and that's a long time. That's basically more than 15 years ago. In 15 years, the online scene has evolved 7 times. So, and now we may be in the US, we might see finally the Shop Safe Act go through after, I think, the 3rd or 4th year that it has been, pushed back. Sorry for the lack of a legal term, but
yeah, you're right. Though it's been kicked around for at least 3 or 4 years. Yeah,
and that's the type of evolution that you want to see. And ultimately, it really does come down to time and to having those cases that help us push the boundaries and improve. And improve as a community, improve as an industry, for the better good, obviously, ultimately of us consumers in this case.
Thanks for listening to part 2 of this series featuring Paolo Ascoli of Corsearch on owning the buy box. Be sure to listen to part 3 of this podcast, available on your favorite podcast player.
You've been listening to Owning the Buy Box, a show from IPSecure. Never miss an episode by subscribing to the show in your favorite podcast player. Please give us a rating, leave a comment, and share episodes that you love. That helps us keep delivering you the tools you need to sharpen your competitive edge and ensure your authorized sellers always own the buy box. We'll see you next time.